The decline in youth mental health has been labeled as the crisis of our time by the U.S. Surgeon General. And if you watch this show, you know that for mental health, there is no quick fix. Whether it's the pandemic, mass shootings, or climate change, the country's youngest generation has a lot on their minds. But research shows us there are ways to help. One of those ways is through after-school programs that engage children and let them express themselves in creative ways. In the Capital Region, one youth organization called Youth FX is doing just that, using civic engagement and art. Producer Catherine Rafferty has this story.
Nestled in the south end of Albany, Youth FX is an organization that teaches youth how to create films. The organization has a focus on telling the stories of people of color from communities that have been historically underserved and in need of opportunities for training in digital media technology. It has grown over the last 16 years from a summer program to year-round after-school programming. Jaslyn Garousing, a student who participated in the summer program last year, says it's important for youth stories to be heard.
It's a very open space, so being able to talk to people who do understand that art is like a healing tool. We're not only what they think of us. We're creators, we're artists, we're filmmakers, we're the next generation. It's important for our stories to be told, and because our voices matter. And we should be in charge of our future.
Making films in community creates a welcoming and free space for youth to express themselves, says co-founder Balwin Suchek.
I think we underestimate the amount of time that young folks spend in their day stifling who they really are, so that they have to kind of put on like a facade or perform for a particular kind of, teacher or class, or, they're trying to get good grades. Like there's all these pressures, and it's like, where do they get to just kind of let their shoulders down and relax, And I think art and artistic practice is really, for me, at the core of that, is for us to just be able to kind of express it. And I think film is really, an incredible medium for that.
Suchek also sees art making as a way to process through experiences that are often difficult to talk about.
Living in a community, in a city, in spaces that are highly under-resourced and have been systemically, disadvantaged for decades, centuries. I think what we see a lot of is safety issues, and that across all realms of what that means: personal, community, family. Gun violence is a really big issue. Addiction is a really big issue. The other thing I don't hear a lot of people talk about is the lack of access to arts and culture. And I think that what they do in their films and in the work that they're making and they're creating is addressing some of those things. We're really about trying to make sure that they feel that those are topics that they can talk about, because often they can't talk about it.
Suchek noticed the pandemic heightened the stress that youth were experiencing, and the inclusive space their program provides allowed the youth to open up about how they were feeling. He called Dr. Caroline Sharkey, visiting assistant professor at UAlbany School of Social Welfare and former teacher at the Albany Free School, to be a trauma-informed consultant for the organization.
So trauma-informed is a framework. And it's an idea that there are key principles that can outline the ways that any space and any place that we interact with others can be responsive to what's going on in their lives. But responsiveness doesn't necessarily mean direct treatment. We have to recognize that there's a scope of practice. I mean, there are things that you are going to need a mental health professional for. When we talk mental health, we're not just talking about the constellations of signs and symptoms that we can assign a disorder to. We're talking about stress. We're talking about traumatic stress. We're talking about fear and uncertainty. And those are a part of our world all the time. But I think collectively in 2020 and beyond that, we started to experience it across all demographics and all socioeconomics. And at the front of that experience were young people saying, we need to do better.
While Sharkey was there, she wanted to continue her research into positive youth development and socially engaged art. She decided to pursue her PhD dissertation in collaboration with Youth FX.
So starting in May of 2022, we began a research process called Youth Participatory Action Research. So young people helped me to develop the research questions for what we were going to be looking at, to understand and chronicle how digital storytelling can be a tool for positive youth development and the creation of what's called a sense of community. We did so using documentary film footage. Really, we captured pretty much every minute of the film program throughout all 6 weeks of the program. But we also conducted interviews that were co-facilitated by young people and myself to understand what young people were experiencing and how a program like this can help address some of the concerns that they have about traumatic stress and to prepare them again for that trajectory of positive youth development.
In conversation with the students, Sharkey identified their top 3 sources of traumatic stress. The first was community violence, the second was economic insecurity, and the third was adultism.
Adultism is a social bias towards adults, the needs, the interests, the voices of adults. The message that adultism sends is you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have a place at the table. You don't have a voice yet. And that was really disheartening to hear. So when we talk mental health, we're not just talking about the neurological or the genetic or the biological factors. We're talking about the social factors that create so much stress that we start to have traumatic stress responses. And that might include fight, flight, freeze, feign, but it also includes isolation and a sense of social exclusion. And that is a public health crisis.
Research shows that after-school programming, particularly art-based extracurriculars, have positive outcomes for students' youth development in academics and civic engagement. In a study by National Endowment for the Arts, researchers found that youth who participated in arts-based activities were more likely to participate in other activities, voting, and volunteering. They also found that students who had intensive arts experiences in high school were 3 times more likely than students who lacked those experiences to earn a bachelor's degree.
So if we're thinking about how do we address this massive tsunami of worries and risks and problems, it's one solution, but it's not the only solution. But one idea is to bring in more arts-based programming and more opportunities for storytelling, narratives, and counter-narratives, because who people are, how they see the world, and the experiences they have, that's data. That can teach us a lot, and it's an outlet.
Suchek and Sharkey are now looking to share what they learned while working together with other after-school organizations.
Like all youth programming outside of schools, and schools need more social workers too, need to have social workers on site because, you know, we are doing our thing as educators, as artists, and we need that support with people that are trained, you know, that have the ability to kind of move through that. Because I think at the end of the day, it's like the young folks are always going to tell you what's going on. It's whether or not you're hearing it or listening to them.
Sharkey says organizations can work to create a safe space for youth by acknowledging trauma and its impact.
Understanding that trauma is real, what the signs and symptoms of traumatic stress are, and that there are multiple paths for healing and recovery. We can't always guarantee that safe spaces are going to be safe, but we can guarantee respect and inclusion. And we can build towards an enhanced sense of safety so that young people, or anyone for that matter, can know and trust that that's a space that they can be who they need to be. I've worked with young people for the better part of 25 years, and it is really heartwarming to know that there's an organization that truly invests in the notion, the simple notion, that young people innately have agency. And it sounds really straightforward, but unfortunately, a lot of youth-centered programming doesn't really embrace that concept. And for social workers, it's really important that we bring this notion and we bring this sense of resiliency and resistance, and then youth-driven empowerment to the forefront so that we can start to think beyond risk factors and protective factors and start to think about the ways we can engage communities.